If you look at what is happening between Washington and Ottawa right now, it doesn't look like politics. It doesn't even look like an election result. It looks like an earthquake. For decades, Canadian elections were background noise to the American political machine. Polite, predictable, irrelevant. But as of this morning, irrelevant is gone. Donald Trump thought he had already won this fight before it started. He thought he was dealing with a fractured Canada, a country too divided to push back, a government too weak to matter. It was catastrophically wrong. Mark Carney didn't just win an election. He won a mandate. 171 seats, a number so large it sent shockwaves straight into the West Wing. He didn't campaign on compromise. He didn't promise to find common ground with Washington. He stood in front of the Canadian people and said, "I will fight." And the Canadian people said, "Good, fight." And the consequences of that one historic night are already rippling through trade corridors, diplomatic back channels, and probably right into your morning news feed. Trump is rattled. The White House is recalibrating, and the media is still stuck on the seat count, missing the real story entirely. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what this majority means, who panicked first in Washington, and why the Canada that Trump thought he could steamroll has officially ceased to exist. So let's cut through the noise. Here is exactly what went down in the last 48 hours. It started, as it always does, with an assumption President Trump, watching the Canadian election results roll in from Mar-a-Lago, assumed a minority government. He assumed chaos. He assumed a weakened Carney crawling back to the table, desperate for a deal, willing to fold on dairy, willing to fold on digital taxes, willing to fold on everything just to survive politically at home. That didn't happen. Instead, the results came in like a freight train. Seat after seat after seat turned red on the map. The Conservatives collapsed under the weight of their association with Trump's rhetoric. The NDP evaporated. And when the dust settled, Mark Carney was standing there with 171 seats, a majority so commanding it hadn't been seen in Canada in a generation. He walked to the podium just after midnight Ottawa time. He didn't look relieved. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had just been handed exactly the weapon he needed. He looked into the camera and said simply, "Canada is ready." He didn't reach out to Washington. He didn't call for calm. He called for sovereignty. And then he went a step further. He announced that with this mandate, Canada would immediately accelerate its economic diversification strategy, deepen trade ties with Europe and Asia, and hold an emergency cabinet session within 72 hours to formalize its response to American tariff threats. The internet broke instantly. Trump fired back with a storm of posts calling the results rigged and Carney a globalist tool. But while Trump was typing, something strange happened in the markets. The Canadian dollar surged. The TSX spiked it open. For the first time in modern memory, a Canadian election result moved global markets in Canada's favor. The world looked at that majority and saw stability. It saw resolve. It saw a country that had made up its mind. You need to understand how shocking this is. This isn't just a change of government. This is a total rewriting of the power dynamic. Trump is used to exploiting weakness. He's used to finding the crack in the foundation and hammering it until the wall falls. But yesterday, Canada poured concrete, and Mark Carney is standing on top of it. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like I'm overstating it. But I want to show you the receipts, because when you see the numbers, you realize this isn't spin, it's math. And the math is turning against everything Trump assumed about Canada. Let's look at receipt number one, the mandate math. 171 seats in a 338-seat parliament. That's not a narrow majority. That is a governing supermajority by Canadian standards. It means Carney doesn't need to negotiate internally. He doesn't need to beg the NDP for support. He doesn't need to water down his positions to keep a coalition alive. He can move fast. He can move hard. He can make decisions that a minority government could never make. When Trump's team modeled their pressure campaign against Canada, they modeled it against a weak, unstable government. That model is now worthless. Receipt number two, the collapse of the Conservative alternative. This is the one Washington was counting on. Pierre Poilievre ran a campaign that was, let's be honest, friendly to Trump's worldview. He echoed talking points about government overreach. He criticized carbon taxes. He was the guy Trump could work with. He didn't just lose. He was decimated. His party shed seats in regions they thought were safe. Carney ran explicitly against Trumpism and won in a landslide. That is the Canadian electorate sending a message not just to Ottawa, but to Washington. The message is this: we have seen what you are selling, and we are not buying it. Receipt number three, the international signal. Now, Trump loves to frame Carney as a globalist. And sure, Carney spent years in the highest corridors of global finance. He ran the Bank of England. He sat in rooms with central bankers and finance ministers from every corner of the planet. But here is why that matters right now. Within hours of the result, sources say Carney received calls not from Washington, but from Brussels, from Berlin, from Tokyo, from Canberra. Congratulations on the surface. But underneath those calls, coordination. We are seeing early reports of accelerated conversations around a Canada-EU trade enhancement framework specifically designed to reduce Canadian dependence on American markets. Do you see what's happening? Trump spent months trying to pressure Canada into submission. Instead, he pushed Canada into the arms of every other major economy on earth. The Dow Jones dipped on the news. The TSX held firm. That is the receipt that matters most. The money is betting on Carney's stability, not Trump's chaos. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful man on earth struggling to bully a country with the population of California? Because Trump fundamentally misread the Canadian psyche, and he misread what his own aggression would produce. We have seen this playbook before. He used it on Mexico. He used it on China. It works when the target is either too economically fragile to resist or too politically divided to organize. Canada was neither. But Trump kept pushing anyway, and every threat, every tariff, every tweet about making Canada the 51st state didn't weaken Canadian resolve. It forged it. When Carney made the election a referendum on Canadian sovereignty versus American bullying, Trump handed him the greatest campaign gift in modern Canadian political history. He kept talking, he kept threatening, he kept reminding Canadian voters every single day what was at stake. And Canadian voters responded with 171 seats. Trump didn't just fail to stop Carney, he helped elect him. He knows this. His advisors know this. We are hearing leaks from the West Wing that senior trade officials are in emergency meetings trying to figure out how to reframe their Canada strategy from scratch. Because the strategy they had, the one built on exploiting Canadian political weakness, no longer exists. But Trump can't admit the miscalculation. His ego won't allow it, so he doubles down on the rhetoric. He calls the election fake. He attacks Carney's character. He threatens new tariffs. It's noise. It's the sound of a tactician who lost the board and is flipping the table instead of admitting defeat. You're watching a man who treats politics like a real estate negotiation. In real estate, you manufacture urgency. You make the other side feel like they have no options. But Carney just walked into the negotiation with a 171-seat mandate and a phone full of calls from every major economy that isn't the United States. He has options, he has leverage, he has time, and Trump has none of those things in the quantities he needs. Look at the response from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They didn't celebrate. They issued a quiet, carefully worded statement about the importance of stable trade relations with Canada. That is corporate America's way of saying, please don't make this worse. Look at the Republican governors in border states. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. They are silent. They are calculating. They know that their manufacturing bases are stitched to Canada at the molecular level. They are quietly terrified of what a fully empowered, fully mandated Mark Carney might do if pushed too far. Now let's talk about Mark Carney, because if you don't follow this closely, you might think he's just another liberal politician who got lucky on election night. You would be wrong. Mark Carney is not a conventional politician. He never was. He was a central banker, a crisis architect, a man who spent his career walking into rooms where the economy was on fire and finding ways to stop the bleeding. He ran the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis. He ran the Bank of England during the chaos of Brexit. He has sat across the table from the most powerful financial and political figures on earth and held his ground. When Trump rages, Carney calculates. Notice what he did on election night. He didn't gloat. He didn't taunt Washington. He gave a measured, data-driven speech about economic resilience and Canadian sovereignty. He was already governing before he finished celebrating. He is positioning Canada as the reliable partner in an unreliable world. And globally, that brand is worth more right now than almost anything else you can offer. The world is exhausted by volatility. European businesses are desperate for supply chain certainty. Asian markets are looking for stable partners outside the U.S.-China binary. Carney is selling exactly that. Every time Trump tweets a threat, Carney looks more indispensable by comparison. Every time Washington disrupts a trade relationship, Ottawa looks like the adult in the room. This is asymmetric warfare at its most sophisticated. Canada cannot match the United States in raw economic power. The gap is enormous. But Carney knows he doesn't need to win a war. He just needs to make the cost of conflict too high for Trump to sustain. He is using pinpoint leverage. He isn't threatening to blow up the entire relationship. He is identifying the exact pressure points, the energy supply lines, the auto parts corridors, the agricultural access routes that cause maximum pain in exactly the states Trump needs to hold in 2026. He's not swinging a sledgehammer. He's using a scalpel. And here is the other thing Carney understands that Trump never will: legitimacy. Trump rules by fear and loyalty. Carney just received the most powerful Democratic mandate in Canadian history. He can walk into any room on earth and say, the Canadian people gave me this authority explicitly to stand up to economic coercion. That is an unassailable position. You cannot bully someone who just got 171 seats telling him to fight back. So why should you care? Maybe you're watching this in Georgia or Wisconsin or Arizona. Maybe you're watching this in the UK or Germany. You might think this is just a Canadian election, just politicians rearranging deck chairs. You're wrong. This changes the architecture of North American trade. It changes the leverage equations that affect the price of everything you buy. The North American economy is not three separate economies. It is one machine built over 3 decades to function as a single integrated unit. Canadian steel goes into American buildings. Canadian energy keeps American factories running. If Carney uses this mandate to structurally pivot Canada away from the United States and toward Europe and Asia, that machine starts to break down. And if you are buying a car this year, watch the price. If you are working in manufacturing in the Midwest, watch the hiring numbers. If you are invested in anything, watch the volatility index, because a fully empowered Canadian government in open strategic conflict with Washington is not a localized problem. It is a continental one. But beyond the economics, there is something bigger happening here. We are watching the end of automatic deference. For decades, when Washington applied pressure, Ottawa absorbed it, quietly, with a smile and an apology. That era ended on election night. Canada didn't just elect a government. Canada elected a posture. And if Canada can stand up, if the quietest, most agreeable neighbor on earth can say no and mean it, who else starts saying no? Does South Korea? Does Japan? Does the entire G7 outside the United States? We are watching the realignment of the Western world in real time. And the engine driving it isn't China, it isn't Russia. It's Washington's own decision to treat its closest friends as adversaries. So where do we go from here? This is the part that keeps analysts up at night, because normally at this stage, there is a back channel, there is a quiet phone call, there is a vague joint statement, and everyone declares a partial victory. But Trump doesn't do back channels after public embarrassments. And Carney, fresh off the largest mandate in a generation, cannot fold without destroying the political capital he just earned. We are looking at 3 scenarios. Scenario A, the standoff. Trump maintains tariff threats. Carney holds his line. Both sides dig in. Trade volumes slow, prices rise, but neither government collapses. The standoff lasts 6 to 12 months until economic pain on the American side forces a ceasefire. Painful, manageable, probably where we land. Scenario B, the pivot. Carney moves faster than anyone expects. Canada signs emergency trade frameworks with the EU and major Asian partners within 6 months. Canadian oil starts flowing to new terminals. Canadian agricultural products find new markets. The structural dependency on the United States begins to erode. This hurts Canada short term, but long term, it is the most devastating outcome for Washington. Because you don't just lose a trade war, you lose a partner permanently. Scenario C, the capitulation. Someone in the White House does the math, really does the math, on what a trade war with a 171-seat Carney government costs in swing state jobs and election cycle optics. And they blink. They find a face-saving formula. They reframe the concessions as a Trump victory. The tariffs get walked back. The crisis de-escalates. This is the scenario Wall Street is praying for. I am not sure it's the scenario we get. My read, we are heading into scenario A, with scenario B accelerating quietly in the background. Carney will not pick a public fight he doesn't need to pick. But behind the scenes, the diversification strategy is already moving. Every day the standoff continues, Canada builds another exit ramp from American dependency. And by the time Washington realizes it, the leverage may be gone forever. We are in uncharted territory. The map you grew up with, the one where Canada and the United States are indistinguishable partners locked in a comfortable, quiet embrace, is being redrawn right now. Carney just proved that Democratic mandates are their own form of ammunition. 171 seats is not a majority. It is a message. The question isn't whether this changes the relationship. It already has. The question is how much of the old relationship survives the change. Do you think Carney's mandate is strong enough to force Washington to the table, or is Trump going to double down until something breaks? I want to hear your take. Is this the moment Canada found its spine? Or is it the beginning of the most painful chapter in North American history? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to know what happens when the cabinet convenes and the formal response to Washington lands, make sure you are subscribed. This story is moving at a speed nobody predicted. Don't blink.